Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state. Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to the week that was on Deadline Detroit. I'm your host, Craig Fahle, broadcasting for the first time from the new bunker studio, official bunker studio in the basement. I figure I'm going to be working out of here for a little while. I might as well doll the place up a little bit. So I just started building it last night. By this time next week, we will have all sorts of decor and things back here. So if you have any suggestions for me as to what I should put back there, let me know. You know, hey, you want to pay me a little bit? I'll put your book on the shelf or something like that. You could always do that. It's a little way to make a little extra cash here. All right, we've got a lot to talk about.
Make cash by putting political statements behind me.
Well, there you go. You know, that's our dear leader up there, Donald Trump, right behind our guest, Alan Langel, who, of course, is the editor and co-founder of Deadline Detroit. Alan, welcome. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. Working out of the office today.
There you go. And I have not been there in months, so who knows? We'll see if I make it back anytime soon. Yeah. Nancy Derringer from Deadline is here as well. Welcome back, Nancy.
Thank you.
And two special guests this week. We have Todd Perkins with us, of course, of Perkins Law Group. He's been on the program before. Welcome back, sir.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course.
And like I told Alan, I'm a loyal supporter, and you speak with the power of the purse, so I'm a regular subscription member of Deadline.
Right.
We appreciate that.
There you go. And again,
Great,
membership's available at deadlinedetroit.com/membership. Check it out, everybody. Yeah. And we have a special guest this week as well. My friend Charlie Langton of Fox 2, one of the hosts of Let It Rip, weekend anchor at Fox 2, and of course, an attorney in his own right. Charlie, welcome back. It's been a long time since I've had you on the show. It's nice to have you back.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Craig. Good to see everybody. I'm Deadline Detroit, a regular reader, but I guess my second appearance, then I'll make the contribution. Is that how that works over there? Is that what it's like?
Hey, it's not pay to play over here, Charlie. In fact, it's no pay to be on the show. So.
Oh no, I just said it because I think that's what drives good media. We gotta support it.
I totally appreciate it because I can say this, that there have been some media outlets who've gone easy on some advertisers, and we've never done that, I can say.
No, and it gets you a subscription to the Deadline Detroit newsletter, which is written by yours truly.
And it's actually quite a good read every single week. Well, speaking of good reads, there's a piece this week that I'm going to get to a little bit later on that Bill McGraw did that I think is fantastic, because we will talk a bit about Donald Lobsinger a little bit later on. Because the guy died 2 years ago and nobody knew, but hey, we'll get to that later on. Bill McGraw did a great piece on that. But let's start where we have been starting just about every week for the past 3 or 4 months now, and that's with the COVID situation. Numbers creeping up across the country. We are not doing a very good job at either social distancing or wearing masks as a society here. Now we're talking about schools opening up a little over a month from now, and a month and a half. I'm not sure I'd be sending my kid to school this fall with the current situation. President Trump came back and said schools will open, and if you don't, I'm going to withhold your federal funding, which seems to me to be somewhat perverse in its logic, one, and two, in its cruelty. But that's just me. I'm going to let Charlie start off on this one here. Are we ready to open schools, and is the president being petulant about this?
Well, let's first of all start with, are we ready to open schools? I don't think that's an issue. We're not. We're just not ready. We don't know enough about the virus. We don't have it under control. The numbers are not going down in significant ways, even though we're making some progress in Michigan. That's good. If you go outside of Michigan, I mean, I don't have to tell you guys, certainly the numbers are not there. But here's the other thing, though. I think that there's a perception, though, when we still have all of these unanswered questions, to have kids go back to school right now, and you're talking about little kids that are maybe not the most, how do I make this?
Discipline. Discipline.
Discipline, that's it. Oh, Nancy, thank you. Discipline, anyway, especially the younger kids. I don't want them licking and touching and whatever. And to have a kid wear a mask all day, I mean, give me a break. It is just not going to work out. So unless we have a some numbers that are stable and for a long period of time, I'm not hearing it. Now, of course, the opposite of that is we cannot have another year go by where these kids are not getting educated. So I'm big on this hybrid stuff, meaning you have maybe some in classroom if you can do it. And it's probably going to be with the older kids, certainly at the graduate or undergraduate level, I should say. I think that's probably possible. But as far as elementary and middle school and high school, good luck. I don't think it's there. But we do have to have a plan, though, to teach the kids. There's no doubt about it. And as far as you want to say about President Trump withholding funding, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of fundraisers that are going on this fall for what.
GoFundMe.
I think
it's.
Go ahead, Todd. Go ahead, and then Alan.
Well, I feel like Charlie. To add on what Charlie said, there's a failure to lead. So we need some plan, and it needs to come from the top. And I know that this Trump with his states' rights, and I think that's a big reason why he hasn't made a national plan, because he wants to promote states' rights. And you see where that's gotten us. But if you listen to the scientists, which this makes it even worse. If you listen to the scientists, this thing goes in waves by time, because you can't stop the issue of time and how it's supposed to go by waves. We're not out of the first phase.
Right.
So, they projected the second phase to start in September or from September to December. If this is part of the first phase, then just imagine, and they projected, because we should follow what the scientists say, not the bureaucrats, not the individuals. And, and I see Craig putting on his mask. The thing about it is there's an absolute arrogance amongst Americans to not want to succumb to wearing a mask or being told what to do. And so since we have the liberties to do those things, in public places, I think if you have a private place, you can dictate who can enter and exit your place and how they should be dressed or how they should be attired. But again, there is no plan in place, and we're just running amok, just trying to piece things together. And you got some states that are benefiting and some states have not taken the opportunity to do it. But yet California, they were very proactive, and they tried to reopen, and the numbers the other day were a record.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say real quick, and I know Charlie wants to jump in. Trump was saying, well, look, other countries like Germany and Sweden have opened their schools, and we need to do it too. Then they show the numbers. Germany had about 245 cases in a day in the whole country. We have 60,000. We don't have it under control yet. We haven't figured out, because it's so reckless out there in some of the, particularly the red states, but any state, our state, we're in East Lansing, like people are partying up there, which I, wrote a column the other day saying, I don't think colleges can open. I can't imagine there's going to be just a major outbreak in all the colleges. I mean, people are going to be partying, and, the presidents of each college says, well, we're going to do, staggered classes. We're going to have social distancing. That's the least of their worries. It's when people go back to the dorms, they go back to the housing, and they're partying and drinking and smoking and hooking up and whatever. It's going to be insanity. If they think they're going to pull it off, I would like to take a wager on it.
Well, look, you see the decision that the Big Ten made the other day to get rid of all conference games. Texas now suggesting that there may be no high school football this year.
Wow.
And if Texas is recognizing that, well, hey, that's a religion down there, Friday Night Lights, And if they're talking about that, and the universities are looking at their athletic schedules and the transmission, they've got research facilities at all these universities. They know what's going on. And if they're urging caution or suggesting that we don't know yet and then we can't make decisions, then we should be listening to them rather than what's coming out of the president's mouth on this one, because this is clearly only, for my opinion, only about his reelection chances in the fall. He knows he's tanked if he doesn't have this under control, and he'll never get it under control the way he's handling it right now. So pretend it's gone away is about the only option he has at this point, Nancy.
Exactly. And it's, Betsy DeVos, is like a good, like the good soldier she is, she falls in line right behind him. And, I think there probably is a not safe, but safer way to have kids in school this fall, but it's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of brain power, and, they're not offering anything. And so this is, I agree with everybody. It's going to be an absolute disaster. There's one other point I want to make though, real fast. I was listening to another podcast, and I won't mention the name because that's a rule in radio and podcasting. It was an interview with a New York Times reporter named Donald McNeil, who's been their lead coronavirus writer for a while now, and probably knows more about this than any other layperson I can think of. And he points out something that I think we really have missed. And he says, this is not a lung disease. This is a vascular disease, okay? It enters via the lungs. It certainly presents itself in the lungs, but the effects, short-term and long-term, that people are having who get COVID have nothing to do with the lungs. He said, because it's carried throughout the bloodstream. And, these microclots you've probably heard about. They're talking about kids, get something called COVID toe. It's almost like a form of gout. I was on Twitter a couple of days ago, and this guy posted that he had it. He was sick for about a month. He was better. He's a workout freak. He said, my resting pulse has always been between 60 and 70, which is pretty standard for somebody who, works on their cardio every, several times a week. He said, now it's 110.
Oh my God.
Wow. How would you like to live the rest of your life with a heart that races at 110 beats per minute, for the foreseeable future?
Well, here's a problem. But here's a problem I see, though, with this. And we can talk about schools. We can talk about masks. We can talk about gyms. We can talk about a whole bunch of things. I'm not convinced yet that the vast majority of the public believes that the coronavirus is really something.
Yep, I think you're right.
I don't think it's going to happen until there's some teeth put in the orders. If you look at every one of, I don't know what number of order we're on, there was just one issue today. I won about 120 executive orders. Every single one of them, every single one, under the law, gives the governor the authority under the Emergency Powers Act to make a violation of that order a misdemeanor. You know what a misdemeanor is? It's up to 90 days in jail and a fine. Again, this is a harsh thing to do, and I don't think it should be done everything. There's discretion here, but until we start getting the courts involved and the police involved to at least enforce some of these orders, like the gyms. There are so many gyms that are opening right now, violating the governor's orders. This bar up near Allen, that one that you wrote that column about, the East Lansing bar, fine them. They can be fined or ticketed or jailed, theoretically, under the governor's order. And until we get a couple of those, I don't think if you're not wearing a mask, even though if you don't, it's a violation of the law and you could go to jail. That's very hard.
It's interesting
to do that.
But Charlie, you have to realize, Detroit started out about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, and they were writing tickets. But then we have I guess what's moved almost in front of the COVID and the coronavirus is now the Black Lives Matter movement. So the disparity in which it would be enforced in the city of Detroit, being a majority minority city, I don't know where it has gone. I speak with a lot of 36 district court judges when this was initially, when people were openly and flagrantly violating the rules, when we first got the rules in place, having Corona parties, all kinds of ignorance. Because to what you said, I guess I'm agreeing with you on almost everything you say today. But but the thing about it is, you're speaking the truth when you say people don't trust that this thing can kill you. When it happens on an individual basis, it happens when a friend of theirs dies, when a family member of theirs dies. Why do we have to get to that point? Why can't we just look at the numbers and see the number of people that have, that we're talking about 10%, and then you're talking about for African Americans, it's a great disparity and a much higher percentage of those who are fatalities versus non-African Americans. So, so when I see in the city of Detroit and I see people walking around, but I do see now in the city of Detroit a little bit more conscientiousness of wearing those masks and being, but when I still go out to the west side of the state.
You're a defense attorney, right?
Well,
Todd, you're a defense attorney. You could make a fortune.
I was going to say, new revenue stream.
Mask.
Yeah, something, but here's the thing.
Well, hold on a second. I just want to get this back on track here for just a second, but we can keep this conversation going. But Betsy Devos, Nancy mentioned Betsy Devos the other day, and the fact that the president suggests that we're going to open schools, she doesn't. I mean, even if she disagreed with him, she's not going to disagree with him. Nobody in this administration has the guts to stand up to him, with the exception of Fauci, and he's been pushed aside. And so you've got her now saying, well, hey, everything we do in life entails some risk. She said, firefighters and police officers have risk in their lives every day, and so do astronauts who are getting ready to go into space. And students should have some risk too, to which I say, bullshit. This is not acceptable. That's kids, crazy. Yes, there is risk. But if we know that we're putting them into a situation where they themselves could get sick or get some of their family members sick, that's irresponsible. And it is basically suggesting that this is just something we're going to live with and not try to address at a federal level. And that's inexcusable.
The risk, when you talk about risk, when she's saying that students should take risks, look, a firefighter, he decides to be a firefighter.
He's an adult.
A journalist, we go out and we decide we want to go to Iraq to cover it. That's our decision. The children, let them grow of age where they can make that decision, whether they want to go in harm's way of whatever they're doing. It's not as a second grader, okay, Timmy, time for you to, man up.
Well, and it's not exactly the same as strapping yourself to the top of a rocket and shooting yourself into space. Yes, we know that is risky. That is an incredibly dangerous occupation, one that there's a pretty good chance you're not going to survive that. Yep. And the school should not be that way. And for me, it is just, again, this lack of empathy, this lack of concern for other human lives is something that is just appalling at a scale that I can't fathom right now. And like I said, if we give up on this and just say it's up to the states individually, it's up to the individual mayors, it's up to individuals themselves to do this without some sort of clear guidance, we're going to be in trouble. And that's reflected in these poll numbers that say,
Betsy DeVos has never been the most articulate person. Yeah. Well, Betsy DeVos has never been the most articulate person in the world. I think there's a very interesting issue here. And Craig, you mentioned this earlier about this election. We do have an election this year. And I'm trying to figure out, you guys can help me out on this one. Is it better to have a lot of distrust? I mean, if people aren't taking the virus seriously, does that help the president or hurt the president? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
I think it helps for him. Those are the people who are going to vote for him.
It might. And
those are the doubters.
Restrictions, we force kids to go back to school. I don't know if the president really wants that, to be honest with you. I think the president, and again, this local control issue, what's better? Who do we trust more to take care of this virus, the president or our governor? Let's just stick with Michigan. And I think a lot of people would say our governor. There's been polls on that. So if in Michigan, because that is a absolute swing state, it is so close to call, everything that I've read about this, is it better to have the governor handle local control, that type of thing, or the president come in with the federal orders that he really hasn't exercised a whole lot? I know, Craig, you want leadership at the federal level, but do we really want that? Or
I want supply lines. I want logistics taken care of at the federal level so that supplies are there for the medical people that need it, because that's still not there. And also just guidance on what is the best practice when you're getting conflicting messages from the president and the Centers for Disease Control. That doesn't make any sense.
Governor in a better position to know what's best for Michigan versus the president.
Oh, for sure.
No, but some general overall guidelines, just like what Craig was saying. Supply lines. Do not politicize whether or not you're going to get PPE.
Thank you.
Because of the party lines where you're at. What I believe is that we should totally turn this over to the scientists and allow the scientists to guide and direct how we should do it, and let the bureaucrats approve it. And that from that perspective, that's not going to happen from a national level, because they have so many different agendas that they're trying to push to ensure that they can reclaim and stay and put in office, because their ability to continue to be in office is more important than their desire to lead properly and their desire to keep people safe. Because they want to say, there's still that underlying joke that this is a Chinese hoax. Yeah.
You know what? Oh, you're
just like I know of something more insidious than just did I freeze?
Yeah, a little bit, but it's the Zoom world we live in these days.
Yeah, but something even more insidious to me, and I don't think I can prove it, but here's the circumstances on how I look at it from an African American perspective. Early on, we were deciding to shut down the country, late March, early April, they didn't have really a timeline in place. They just decided the governor gave a timeline, I think of May 29th or something of that nature, was the first date that she gave. And I'm not talking about Michigan, but I'm talking about on a national level. When they started seeing that African Americans were dying at a higher rate, I believe, this is and I said I can't prove it, they came on an agenda to say, hey, let's open up the country more. I think that there's an insidious plan in place. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I think it's population control. I think it's a lot of different things that are in place that is on a larger level than just this country. And they're using this country.
Can I read something I posted on Facebook yesterday?
Sure.
It says, could it be a Netflix show? An unlikely presidential GOP candidate wins the presidency. But by the fourth episode, we learn that he's really an evil Democrat operative who is out to kill off the GOP party and its followers. So when a pandemic hits, he convinces his followers to attend mass rallies without masks and social distancing, and convinces governors in red states to prematurely reopen bars and beaches, and mocks Democrats who follow CDC guidelines.
Well, I mean, let's shift just a little bit here, because Todd was talking about an effort here. Once it was found out the African Americans are dying at higher rates from this. Look, the president is not making a secret of how he plans to win this election this time around. To see him this week, and over the course of the last 2 weeks, really, since we were on vacation, I can take a little bit of liberty here. Really go all in on things like the Confederate flags, attacking Bubba Wallace in NASCAR over the noose thing, suggesting that we're tearing down our heritage. And I'm like, you're from New York. What part of the Southern Confederate flag is part of your freaking history, Donald Trump? But he is definitely going all in, suggesting that and it's not so much the Southern strategy. This is pretty overt. He is basically trying to play on people who are afraid that their white nationalist lifestyle is somehow going to be erased or replaced. It's scaring me.
This morning, I watched the video of the woman in Lake Orion who pulled out a gun on the black family. And it was so painful to watch, because you could see, I mean, it's just instant hatred, mutual hatred, like, they're just going at it. And I thought it was so painful. And I thought it was so, I mean, racism just didn't start. Hatred just didn't start now. I always say hatred never goes out of style. But when I watched it, I could just feel the times being represented by both sides. I mean, the 15-year-old girl says she was bumped by this white woman and she wanted an apology, and the white woman basically tells her to go, and so they start going at it. I mean, the white woman could have said, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I hit you or I bumped you, and that would have been it. And it reminds me, I'll tell a real quick story. When I was in Jerusalem for my nephew's wedding, I was sitting next to my cousin's husband, who's a really cool guy. And he told me after the army, he went traveling, and he was in Mozambique, and he was traveling with a backpack, and he found a tree with some shade. So he sat down, he had this big backpack, and suddenly one of the villagers started walking toward him, and this guy looked really angry, and he thought, oh my God, this guy's gonna kill me and steal my backpack. So he got up, ready to fight. And then as the guy got closer, he said that guy just had the angriest look, like he was gonna tear him apart. He says, as he got closer, the guy, my cousin's husband, got down on his knees and bowed down to him. And the guy just started laughing and kept walking. And he said, I've used that in my life in many instances. And I thought of that this morning as I was watching that video. If that person would have just deferred and said, I am really sorry, but it just escalated, and to a point where the woman is pulling out a gun on them and they're calling each other names. So
is this implicit bias that the governor was talking about yesterday, and that they want to have education, especially for healthcare people, to learn about what is the implicit bias means? Is that it's unconscious. We don't know that there's a bias, and we don't think that there's a bias, but we are trained unconsciously. I'm talking white people often, and against African American people. So is this a good thing? I think we're going to hear those words more. I think we're going to develop what the meaning is of this. But I think, Alan, that's what you're really talking about.
I don't think that was implicit at all. I think that's explicit bias. But
that might be a little extreme. That might be a little I'm really intrigued with this. I have to learn more about this concept, though. But I think from what I heard, Dr. Roush was talking about it yesterday, the governor was talking about it yesterday. It is intriguing to me, and I want to learn a little more about this. But I think there's definitely some merit, and it's worth understanding that sometimes we just do things we just don't know what we do, and we need to, if we're going to take this step and learn from what the virus, Black Lives Matter, all of these things are teaching points now. Let's go beyond this and really dig into something, and maybe there's some good that can come out of this whole thing. I think there is.
Look, if we were actually going to have a real national dialogue on this, which I would like to see, that's the kind of thing that elected officials can actually get going and start talking about these things in a real way. Instead, President Trump is playing on people's fears. He's playing on an implicit bias. He's playing on that to make people think that somehow their way of life is going to change dramatically if we give an inch on anything. Something as simple as removing a statue of Robert E. Lee, a traitor to this nation, a Stonewall Jackson, a traitor to this nation, naming military bases after people that were traitors to this nation. And President Trump suggesting that somehow we can't change the names on these bases because they're good luck because we won 2 world wars by training people at these bases. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. This is
the dumbest thing.
Todd wants to go at it here.
The dumbest thing in a long line of dumb things he said. They call up his lies and everything like that. But here's the thing. Let's talk about historically. What happens with traitors? The traitors are usually killed. And that's how we get rid of traitors. So if you are a Confederate, then you are treasonous. You're a person who is committing an ongoing act of treason if that's what you support. So here's another thing. I was on Mildred's show, and the guy from the president of the NAACP in Atlanta, he said something that was so profound to me. He says, listen, and I think that the battleground is in those states where they do have those memorials of the Confederacy, with the flags flying above national stadiums and things of that nature, which are being taken down now. I think that's a positive movement. But he said this. He said in 1865, the gray and the blue, those military guys made their differences, and one side won. He said the reality is, from a personal perspective or from the people's perspective, the Civil War is still going on. He says these people are still fighting the Civil War, and they're fighting it in a surreptitious way. It's almost like how racism has not become so overt. I think that it's how over time it's become more surreptitious. I used that word before, but you don't see it. It's not present always and everywhere, but the effect of it is still catastrophic to certain aspects of society, particularly African Americans, because we've been here just as long as anyone else. If you look at the history, we're as much to do with the growth because of all the free labor that they enjoyed for 200 years or 250 years, and now it continues in an element of disparity. Now, so
I used to work with a North Carolinian who referred to the Civil War as the War of Northern Aggression. It kind of ironically is sort of a joke. But it was he said that is kind of the way the Civil War is still seen in the late 20th century at the time.
When we talk about racism, though, I think in the last 4 years, I think it has become okay to be more open about it. I think the complaints about the complaints about political correctness used to be about, we sometimes question what's too much political correctness, but for some of the basic, from some of the people out there, their idea is like, yeah, we can say the N-word again. Yeah, we don't have to, our president's a racist. We can be a racist too. Not to defame this man who I've got his picture on the wall.
Well, hold on a second, because we're running out of time, and I do want to get to a couple of things before we get to Schmuck of the Week, because I think I've got a good one this week. But I do want to talk a little bit about the Supreme Court, because a lot of people have held their noses and supported Donald Trump because of the idea of getting new Supreme Court justices, court appointees. But you don't always get what you pay for with the Supreme Court. You had Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, Trump's 2 nominees go against him in the ruling about his tax returns. That took place the other day. And I mean, personally, I don't care if I ever see President Trump's tax returns. The only guy I care about seeing him is the prosecutors in New York. Well, yeah, one day we'll get to see them, and I'll be fine. I have no idea what's in there, but if the prosecutors get a chance to see them and they don't find anything in there, then great, whatever. But this is I was excited to see that this ruling came down yesterday, that he was going to actually have to turn them over to the one person I think actually needs to take a look at them. What does everybody else think about that?
I want to hear from the lawyers first on this one.
Charlie.
Well, I thought it was a very good, I thought it was, Todd, I thought it was a good decision. I thought it was a good decision. I think there's an issue of giving it to a prosecutor and in a state, let's remember, that has a grand jury system. We don't have a grand jury system in the state. I mean, we have it, very rare. We don't use it much. So it's going to be private. It's going to be under seal. And unless there's an indictment or a trial, we're never going to see these financial records. So there is some safety net there. Whereas I think Congress, good or bad, Congress tends to go on fishing expeditions. It's blatantly partisan. And despite what your political beliefs are, I hate to see politics in the court. I am a realist enough to know that it does sometimes exist. But Craig, when I see Gorsuch and Kavanaugh especially go against the president, I say to myself, you know what, that's pretty good. Let's not forget the Chief Justice, John Roberts, who wrote these opinions. But we really want to preserve the integrity of the court. And if we're looking for a criminal investigation for which the rules are the most strict as they come, let's get to the facts, the truth, in a criminal investigation that's secretive with the grand jury system. It's a good system. It does work. Let's turn over the documents. But in Congress, where it's often a free-for-all, and I'm not saying I don't want to discourage Congress, they do a job, but it's too much, it's too broad, and I think that's essentially what the court said. The court got it right on this one.
All right, Todd, go ahead.
Well, my position is I'm so happy to see, you know, at least from these decisions, that the Gorsuch and the Trump appointees to the Supreme Court truly believe in the spirit of the law. Because these decisions, let's also talk about the DACA decision. It was against something that Trump wanted too, but they are finding decisions. I think Roberts is really trying. I think that they can become more concerned and less politicized now that they're there for life and looking at their legacy. I think Roberts is, you know, if this continues with this court, I mean, he's looking at having a legacy like Warren, Justice Warren, you know, and running that court, even though he was a conservative. Remember that, you know, and Justice Roberts as Chief Justice, he is, you know, I think he's doing a heck of a job. But here's what I do believe, what might suspect what's going to happen with the Trump records. I do believe they're going to find fault. I don't know whether or not they're going to indict him or not, because at some point in time, especially if he loses, there's a certain sense of healing that Americans might want and to get beyond Trump and not indict him. But here's what they're going to find, I believe. Trump has borrowed money on his properties, and I'm sure he's increased the value in order to support the loans that he's gotten on those properties. But on the other end, when he files his taxes, he's going to depreciate the value of the property. And that is a plethora of different fraud charges, bank fraud charges, wire fraud charges, you know, and probably doing it while he's a sitting president. You know what I'm saying? Because these are the things that, you know, let's see how much PPP money he got. And, you know, I guess we won't know that until next year, because that would be next year's tax returns. But, you know, but businesses have to file quarterly tax returns. So we'll see. But he's got this in quote unquote trust. So it's really not his active hand this year. But, you know, these are some real scary things that you can suspect that he has done, and that's what they're going to find when they look at those records. So,
well, his spokesperson yesterday, McEnany, I think that's how you pronounce her name, said basically that the audit is still ongoing of Donald Trump's taxes. So basically, the audit's been going on for at least a decade at this point in time. So hey, hopefully they'll finish that up one of these days, and we can get it done. All right. Well, hey, listen. We're running out of time, and we do need to get to Schmuck of the Week here. I've got a good one, I think. And should I go first, or should I give it to somebody else?
Go first.
I'll go first here. My Schmuck of the Week is Tucker Carlson. He is a multi-time nominee on this program. Tucker Carlson going out calling Tammy Duckworth, the sitting senator from Illinois, who is a decorated war veteran, Purple Heart winner, double amputee, helicopter pilot, called her somebody that hates America, obviously trying to take down her potential to become the vice presidential nominee, because the last thing the Republicans want is a Democrat with military credentials taking that mantle away from them. But at the same time, his attacks on her were so ridiculous, so beyond the pale. And for me to say that about Tucker Carlson is really saying something, because this guy's been a scumbag for as long as I can remember. Never met him personally. He might be the nicest guy in the world. I don't know. But he is shameless in going after people.
Can I do my Tucker Carlson face?
Please do. Yeah.
So he's interviewing somebody, he's always going. So anyway, go ahead.
That's true. See, in radio, you can do that. You're not supposed to do that on television. You're supposed to try to be straight-faced. Exactly. But Tucker Carlson is my Schmuck of the Week. Tammy Duckworth had a response in the New York Times today. I ask people to read it because it's a good response. It's not too vitriolic. She's not that angry, but she does call him out for what it is. Basically a distraction from what she says, the job that Trump is not doing on everything right now. But Tucker Carlson, he's my nominee. Nancy, why don't you go next?
Okay, I'll make this quick. Moments before we went on, I was scanning the news and I read this hilarious piece about anti-mask videos, the performative nature of anti-mask videos at slate.com. And I'm nominating Louisiana State Representative Danny McCormick, who produced this insane anti-mask video where at one point he's shown with a chainsaw. This little blue mask, like the one that Charlie has, is hanging on a string. He's got a chainsaw and he's going to like saw it in half, but because that thing weighs a few grams and a chainsaw is, is much heavier, it just kind of bounces. But he goes on and he says, if they can make you take the mask, they can microchip you, they can vaccinate you, they can make you take the mark. So this is
the mark. That's my favorite. Yes.
Take the mark. So this is
Well, who was the person that I'm trying to remember? It was somebody famous. Was it Kanye that maybe said if you get the microchip, you won't be able to cross into heaven?
Probably.
I think it was.
Kanye is
Let's not talk about Kanye.
Well,
no, he's an unmedicated manic depressive.
So he can't be Schmuck of the Week? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we do him more of a human mercy by just ignoring him.
Okay, all right. So Todd, who do you got this week?
Mine is easy. I don't have to have any commentary, nothing. I'm saying more words than I need to say right now about the Schmuck of the Week. It will be, and for now, evermore in the near future, Trump.
Well,
period. All of this comes from him. All of it comes from him.
But you can't. We named the trophy after him because after a while, it's like the Lombardi Trophy. You're such the perfect person to have it that you name the trophy after him, because we could do him every single day. I could have Schmuck of the Day, and he would win 364 out of 365 days of the year.
Maybe we need to add like Oakland clusters to it or something like that.
That's right.
Like
4-star Schmuck of the Week.
Yeah. So sorry, I didn't mean.
But that works, Todd. That's okay.
He's kind of like Fred Astaire. They used to have the best dressed man in the world in the 40s or 30s in Fred Astaire's heyday. They would just select another person because Fred Astaire was understood to be the best dressed man, and the most debonair, and they would just give it to someone else. So I guess that's the same way that I give it to Trump, but I think I would be forlorn in my duties as a lawyer and as a citizen not to just say that. He needs the award every day.
That's how I feel about George Clooney and the sexiest man alive. Go ahead.
All right, Charlie Langton, who do you got?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm trying to think of something good here. Betsy Devos, I would have thought somebody else would have said before me. But
well, she was real high up on my list.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the way she talks. I kind of like that. But there's a guy. There's a local story here. There was a skull, a human skull that was found in a home in Lincoln Park. And here's the guy. And unfortunately, this guy, I forget his name right now, it escapes me.
Mark Allen Eberly.
Yeah, that's him.
And it was Trenton, not Lincoln Park. But yeah,
I'm sorry.
okay.
It was Trenton. So So we go down to this house, and there's a human skull. But the backstory, though, is that this guy had lived at the house for a while, whatever. He had a girlfriend. He gets in a fight with a girlfriend, whatever. All of a sudden, he just kind of goes off on the deep end, sells the house, moves away, then gets into a fight with cops in Kentucky, I think it was.
Tennessee.
In a shootout. Tennessee. Thank you, Nancy.
Whatever.
Detail. My editor. The principal. But he gets in a fight, and they shoot up. They shoot this guy dead. And then all of a sudden they go back and the house that the people just bought in Everly's house, they find this human skull. So what do you do?
In the fire pit.
In the fire pit. Yeah.
What do? You have a human skull, you keep it in the fireplace. Oh, gee, maybe I shouldn't keep it there. I'm going to get out of here and go to Tennessee or wherever he went. I just think he's talk of the week. I don't know why, and he's not here to defend himself. I'm sorry for that point. But it's just a weird.
Our first ever posthumous Schmuck of the Week award right there.
I read those stories in order to aggregate them, and I think the creepiest thing about it was I went on his Facebook page, and he had a lot of photographs obviously of Tennessee because there were hills, and there was one very loving-looking photograph of a chainsaw. So I was like, it wasn't, it looked like the kind that if you were going to sell the chainsaw that you would like, it wasn't like clotted with blood and hair or anything, but I was just like, ooh, man.
So it wasn't like he slightly used wood chipper from the movie Fargo. All right. Alan Lengel, who you got?
I am going with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who has refusing to mandate masks. And there's groups that are pressuring him. I mean, Florida is totally out of control. There are over 10,000 cases a day and a lot of days. And, his thing is like, people will use common sense and use the mask. So I'm not going to mandate it. But it's like, we have laws about seatbelts because not everybody uses common sense. We have laws about drunk driving. We have laws about, a lot of things that we normally think. I mean, generally we're not going to murder anyone, but we have laws on the book because there are people who will do that. And so common sense is really not, we have laws because we don't trust that people are going to adhere to all the basic, things. So I nominate him.
All right. Well, this was an honorary mention for me was Ted Cruz, who, in reaction to the Supreme Court ruling yesterday on the state of Oklahoma, which gives tribal leaders their eligibility over certain prosecutions, just said the Supreme Court just gave away half of Oklahoma. Now, a couple of things that are wrong with this.
Who would
One,
miss it?
it's a jurisdictional question over law enforcement, but two, how do you give away something that you kind of stole in the first place?
Right.
Well, let's talk about Mount Rushmore then, maybe on another podcast.
Okay, well, we'll keep that in mind. But anyway, that Oklahoma decision is really, really interesting. Another one where Gorsuch went the other way from the conservative justices there. But that could have some interesting effects, and we'll be watching that pretty closely.
I was seeing when the rulings yesterday when they were 7-2, and I said, I don't even have to see who the two were. I mean,
Alito and Thomas.
Alito and Thomas, two people who refuse to look at the law beyond the political stuff. I mean, Clarence Thomas is always voting, politically. I mean, it's just disgraceful.
That's why you got
wrong.
the job.
Kavanaugh was the vote that went with the liberals on the Oklahoma decision. He's apparently got a history of rulings in tribal favor, which is good. But hey, gee, imagine holding the United States to one of its treaties. Imagine that. It's about freaking time.
Trump is all about breaking treaties.
Well, now I just want to see if it goes any further than that, because I'll tell you what, there's a great book about the Osage tribe in Oklahoma and how basically the FBI was created to investigate a bunch of murders that were killing. There was a bunch of murders of Native Americans and Native American leaders who owned all the oil wealth in Oklahoma at the time, back in the 1920s. And this is a great book. Flowers of the Killer Moon is what it's called. If you like historical nonfiction, it's worth reading. The FBI was created because of this, investigations that needed to happen. And it gives you a great history of Oklahoma and how the United States government and business interests have basically just violated all the terms of the treaties that we had in that state for as long as that treaty's been in existence.
Pretty
So
much
something worth
all
doing.
the treaties in all the states.
Of course.
But, you know.
But like I said, maybe this opens that door to right historical wrongs for the first time in a long time. Well, all right, we've got to wrap it up. This has been the week that was on Deadline Detroit. My sincere thanks to our guest, Todd Perkins. Appreciate you being back, sir. Maybe we'll see you in person at some point pretty soon. I certainly hope so.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a great show. I know people love it, and I'll be always in support of it.
All right. I appreciate that very much. Charlie Langton from Fox 2. I will be watching you on the news tomorrow and, of course, on Let It Rip. Maybe I'll make a return appearance there one of these days. You never know.
Be careful what you say there, Craig. What do you
Hey, I live a lot closer to the station now than I used to. It's easy for me to get over there. All right. Nancy Derringer, we always appreciate you. Thank you very much for being here. Hey. And Alan Lengel, thank you. And
thank you. Hey, stay home safely.
All right. So before we actually end, I do have to thank Michael Lucido as well for engineering this broadcast. Michael, you're doing a great job. I appreciate it very much. And again, as Alan said, stay home safely. And don't forget your masks, people. It's not that hard. Take it easy, everyone.
Take the mark.
Take care.
My name's ML Elric. I'm an investigative reporter and a connoisseur of fine yogurts. I know a little bit about Detroit. I know a little bit about deadlines. And I'm asking you to become a member of DeadlineDetroit.com. Like me, I'm not asking you to do anything I wouldn't do. I'm making a monthly donation. My wife is making a monthly donation. I know that seems redundant, but they need the money, and the money goes to a good place. Getting the story out, getting the truth out. Because if we don't support local journalism, there's some people a couple blocks away from here who are going to get away with a whole bunch of stuff that's going to cost you a whole lot more than just a few bucks out of your pocket every month. Go to DeadlineDetroit.com, become a member. You'll see it's really easy at the top of the website. Give early, give often, give generously. Just give a damn. That's the best way I know how.
Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization doing great stuff all around the state.